Welcome to PraDa Law Live, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday. I'm Jackie Mendez. I'm your host for today's show. I can't believe it's Friday. We're excited. And today's show, we're going to be talking to you guys about criminal law. We have our attorney, Mike Haber.
How are you? Thank you for having me again.
Of course, our partner here at PraDa Law, Daniel Silver.
Thanks, Jackie. TGIF.
And that's right, TGIF. And of course, the lovely Jennifer Pratt.
Thank you, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone this evening.
Also our partner here at PraDa Law. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday. We're happy it's Friday. And that's why we're going to be talking to you and covering some criminal law today. 888-88-LEGAL. That's the number on the screen for you guys to call for your free call and free consultation. So let's go ahead and get right into the conversation.
But here's the most important question. Is it Payday Friday?
Ooh, I hope so.
Maybe, maybe not. Depends.
How about Fifth Amendment Friday?
Ooh. Well, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about this evening. Our panel is going to be speaking to us about just that, the Fifth Amendment. So we have a Constitution, and I know a lot of us have been hearing about the Constitution and whether or not we should be restraints to it or not. You know what I'm talking about. You've heard it. You've seen the news. What is the Fifth Amendment? What does it protect? And how can you use it, God forbid, this weekend if you need to? Let's start with Attorney Haber. Attorney Haber, briefly, what is the Fifth Amendment and how can I use it this weekend if I need to?
Well, thanks for the question. So the Fifth Amendment covers an awful lot of ground. The most well-known aspect of the Fifth Amendment is the privilege, we call it, against compulsory self-incrimination. That means that you can't be forced to be a witness against yourself, and that plays itself out in what most people know as your Miranda rights from the case of Miranda versus Arizona. But there are definitely other components to the Fifth Amendment above and beyond compulsory self-incrimination. You have double jeopardy. You're protected from being charged and punished and prosecuted for the same crime more than once. You have due process of law, which is extremely important. So there are other components to that as well.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Attorney Haber. Once again, 888-88-LEGAL. The call is free, the number's easy, and the consultation will also be free.
So if I'm this weekend, if I get pulled over or I'm in any sort of situation where there's authorities, police officers, how can the Fifth Amendment help me, attorneys? Do I invoke this? How does it work?
Well, if you're asking me, we've talked about this many times, so I always go back to it because it's one of those fundamental things that should be beaten into everybody's head, every citizen's head. Up X2, shut up and lawyer up. It's almost never a good idea to try and convince law enforcement of the righteousness of your position and that they're incorrect. Sometimes it works. I'm not saying that people can't talk their way out of stuff. I'm just saying that it's usually a really bad idea.
And pay attention to when you're being read your Miranda rights. If you're being read your Miranda rights, you're being read your Miranda rights for a reason. They are giving you fair warning that anything you say after that can be used against you because they've basically informed you of your rights, and you can waive your rights. And we never suggest that you waive your rights to say anything or any defenses.
But what's even more important than that is that period of time where they don't read you your Miranda rights, because you're only going to get read Miranda after you've actually been taken into custody and the police intent is to question or interrogate you. So the two components of being in custody and being interrogated prompt Miranda. The bigger concern is what happens before that, right? So take the example of, let's say, your basic traffic stop. You get pulled over for speeding. The officer says, oh, do you have anything in the car that I ought to know about? And you decide to blurt out, yeah, there's a severed head in the back seat, or I have a kilo of cocaine in the trunk, or whatever it may be. You know, these are statements that are going to hurt you down the pike. You have not been read Miranda. They're voluntary, and they're definitely harmful.
Right. They may be subject to suppression.
Well,
hopefully.
any evidence or whether it's a statement or it's physical evidence, is always going to be subject to a motion to suppress. But you're not going to get very far when you make voluntary utterances to law enforcement. If there's no obligation for them to have Mirandized you at that point and you just start to blabber, the odds are those are coming in.
It's akin to like the plain view from the last episode.
Exactly. You know, once you start yapping, you start yapping. And I think it's real important. I think we're going to talk about this probably later in the show. But it's not just what you say, it's also what you do, right? And so that can extend to an awful lot of different areas, you know, including social media, for example. You know, it may not be just what you say, but it may be those things that you put out there for the world to see.
Right. Okay. Well, actually, I do have a question coming in from Julio. I guess this has to do about what you do, right, prior to being detained. So he's asking that if he blows, if he has, a breathalyzer test, right? Does he have to blow? Is he covered with his Fifth Amendment right?
So let me say this to Julio. Breathalyzers and Fifth Amendment have nothing to do with one another. Okay. They're completely unrelated and separate issues. The Fifth Amendment protects you against verbal statements, so it protects your words, not your acts. And this is very common, though. People get this confused a lot in regards to things like breathalyzers and roadside sobriety exams, right? But there is very clear case law that says those physical exercises are non-testimonial in nature. But since we have a couple extra seconds, I'll just throw this in there. There's a case in Florida, a Supreme Court case called Allred v. State. And in that case, it dealt with what was called the alphabet test. So most people who get popped for DUI or have been through a DUI have gone through the experience. They understand that they're going to be told to stand on one leg and to balance and to follow the pen with their eyes. I'm not going to go through all those, but they used to have a test called the alphabet test where they would ask you to recite the alphabet backwards. Whoa. Yeah, tough one, even when you're sober.
For the average person as well.
Absolutely, but this the defendant in that case, Allred, took it all the way up to the state Supreme Court and got a ruling that said, no, that's testimonial. It's different than asking you to stand on a leg or to balance or to do any of those other things.
Right, because that's more of a physical test, to see if your equilibrium is kind of off.
And your breathalyzer would fall into the same category. You're not speaking.
Okay.
Now, of course, you have a right to refuse breath, and that's a whole different show. Hopefully one day we can do a DUI-related show, because there's an awful lot to talk about.
Maybe next week. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Me and Julio go down to the schoolyard and we get encountered, we don't say anything.
Simon and Garfunkel. I know that one. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we do have to take a short break. Production's telling me we do have to take a short break, so we'll be right back with more questions. Please tune in, 888-88-LEGAL. Give us a call. Ask us your questions. The consultation is free. We'll be right back with PraDa Law Live. I'm Jackie Mendez. Stay tuned.
I know you're home right now asking yourself, how? How will I pay my rent, my mortgage, my bills, my credit card debt? I'm attorney Alexis Garcia with PraDa Law. I've personally helped people with financial problems over the last 10 years. I understand what you are going through. We saw people lose it all in the 2008 financial crisis. You don't have to lose it all. The consultation is free. Call us now. I will help protect what you have built. You have nothing to lose by calling us. Call us now. These are trying times. This deadly virus is affecting our health, economy, jobs, our small business owners. Bankruptcy protection may be able to save assets and immediately stop your creditors from harassing you. Small business owners, employees of business of any size. We know you need help. Call us now. We will help you get back on your feet. Don't wait until it's too late. This is the time to call.
Sé que estás en la casa ahora mismo preguntándote, ¿cómo voy a pagar la hipoteca, la renta, los biles, las tarjetas de crédito? Soy la abogada Jennifer Pratt con PraDa Law. Yo personalmente he ayudado a las personas con problemas financieros durante los últimos 10 años. Yo entiendo por lo que estás pasando. Vimos cómo la gente lo perdió todo durante la crisis financiera de 2008. No tienes que perderlo todo. Llama ahora. La consulta es gratis. Te ayudaremos a proteger todo lo que has construido durante todos estos años. Sabemos que estos son tiempos difíciles. Este virus mortal está amenazando nuestra salud, nuestra economía, nuestros empleos y a los propietarios de nuestras pequeñas empresas. La consulta es gratis. Llame ahora. Te ayudaremos a recuperarte. No esperes hasta que sea demasiado tarde. Llame ya.
And welcome back to PraDa Law Live, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jackie Mendez. I'm your host for today's show. It's Friday. We're talking criminal law. I'm here with Attorney Haber, Attorney Silver, and Attorney Pratt. And the conversation's getting a little spicy for a Friday. And why do we have criminal talk on Fridays? Well, because the weekend is upon us. You never know when you're going to get into some kind of, issue, trouble, challenge. And we want you guys to know your rights. We want you to know you have solutions. And that's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. 888-88-LEGAL. Give us a call. The consultation is free.
That's right, Jackie. That was a great onset into the weekend. That's right, and that's why our criminal shows are on Fridays, because we want you guys to have the best information right before the weekend. And we're not trying to ruin your weekend, but ladies and gentlemen, knowledge is power. With that being said, a lot of us are familiar with the infamous O.J. Simpson case. And in that case, there was a detective. Some of you may remember his name, Mark Furman. And I want to talk this segment with Attorney Silver and Attorney Haber regarding famous cases, famous situations, people. I know members of Congress, or maybe not members of Congress, but people who have testified before Congress have asserted and invoked their Fifth Amendment when asked questions under oath. And so I want to talk about the Mark Furman case. In that case, he was a detective on the case, and they straight up were, I believe it was a deposition. I don't think it was an act. I think it was an out of camera, not as part of the trial, where they literally asked him under oath, did you plant evidence against O.J. Simpson? And he invoked his Fifth Amendment. Attorney Haber, talk to us about how it is that a detective on a live pending criminal case can invoke.
One of the first people on the scene as well.
I'm sorry?
He was one of the first detectives on the scene.
That's part of the allegation. And I think a question like, Jackie, did you plant evidence so that Mr. Silver can go to jail? Crucial. I mean, I'm thinking, Attorney Haber, that if I'm innocent, I'm saying no. But this person decided to say, I invoke my Fifth Amendment. Why? Does that mean he's guilty? Can the jury think he's guilty now?
Well, that goes to the whole heart of why we have a Fifth Amendment. So if you go back to Old England, people would get called in accused of committing offenses against the crown, and they were required to explain themselves. And if they didn't explain themselves, then they were presumed guilty. So we have the exact opposite. Our founding fathers decided we're not going to allow people by executive fiat, here we don't have a king, we have an executive branch. We're not going to let the executive force people to speak. So that's where you get this privilege against compulsory self-incrimination. So why would an individual invoke the Fifth? Well, I suppose there's a lot of reasons they might invoke the Fifth. But whether there's a reason or not, a jury is going to be instructed in any criminal case very firmly that they are not permitted in any way, shape, or form to take that silence or that invocation and somehow twist it into an admission or a presumption or a belief of guilt. So as a criminal lawyer, we get this all the time in jury selection. This happens frequently, where you'll ask the panel, how many of you think that just because my client is sitting here, he must have done something wrong? Right. And it's a legitimate question, because there is a percentage of the population that believe if you were arrested, if you were charged, if you're standing in a courtroom, you must have done something. So that's exactly why the Fifth is there. So why did Mark Furman invoke the Fifth? Well, I'm sure Mark had his reasons for invoking the Fifth. But why would any average citizen invoke it? For the very precise reason that you don't want to be compelled to testify. You don't want to be forced to have to answer questions. Where does the line start? Where does the line stop? You have the right to draw that line in the sand.
On one of the prior shows, we talked about, asking a criminal defense attorney, how do you defend someone if you know they're guilty? And it's like, well, that's not our job. It's our job to defend against what the state can prove. And our client should not be giving the state any ammunition by making statements which could lead to admissible evidence that could be used against them at trial.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. 888-88-LEGAL, ladies and gentlemen. That's the number to find solutions. Give us a call here at PraDa Law.
So, Attorney Haber, when you're pulled over and let's call it a DUI stop, the police officers are going to ask you whether or not you will do a field test, whether or not you'll do a blow test, you'll blow into the machine, a breathalyzer test. How is it that these same police officers, though, if and when they're charged with crimes, can then now, like Detective Mark Furman did, invoke the Fifth Amendment? So how does that work? They're asking us to do something that perhaps they themselves would invoke their Fifth Amendment and not do? Is that how that works?
It's not really, again, it's not really a Fifth Amendment situation when you're talking about whether or not you're going to take roadsides or blow into the machine. But I will tell you this, having represented my share of police officer, accused, defendant clients, I have never represented a police officer that took a breath test, ever, not once. So they'll ask you to take them, but I've never met a police officer who would willingly take one himself, nor do they take roadside sobriety examinations. They just don't do it.
That says a lot, doesn't it?
And you know, for me personally, I think the roadside is a little bit of a setup. I think the whole backwards ABC.
Well, remember, they can't do that anymore.
Okay,
Right.
but even the actual roadside, and I know we're coming up on a commercial break, has anyone sober tried to do it?
They're designed to make you fail.
It's just
Yeah,
nearly
they really
impossible.
I think
Nearly
so.
impossible.
They call them tests for your normal faculties. We call them abnormal tests for your normal faculties.
Yeah. Well, production is definitely telling us we do have to take a break, so we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, guys. We have more coming up here on PraDa Law Live. Stay tuned.
I know you're home right now asking yourself, how? How will I pay my rent, my mortgage, my bills, my credit card debt? I'm attorney Alexis Garcia with PraDa Law. I've personally helped people with financial problems over the last 10 years. I understand what you are going through. We saw people lose it all in the 2008 financial crisis. You don't have to lose it all. The consultation is free. Call us now. I will help protect what you have built. You have nothing to lose by calling us. Call us now. These are trying times. This deadly virus is affecting our health, economy, jobs, our small business owners. Bankruptcy protection may be able to save assets and immediately stop your creditors from harassing you. Small business owners, employees of business of any size, we know you need help. Call us now. We will help you get back on your feet. Don't wait until it's too late. This is the time to call.
Sé que estás en la casa ahora mismo preguntándote, ¿cómo? ¿Cómo voy a pagar la hipoteca, la renta, los biles, las tarjetas de crédito? Soy la abogada Jennifer Pratt con PraDa Law. Yo personalmente he ayudado a las personas con problemas financieros durante los últimos 10 años. Yo entiendo por lo que estás pasando. Vimos cómo la gente lo perdió todo durante la crisis financiera del 2008. No tienes que perderlo todo. Llama ahora. La consulta es gratis. Te ayudaremos a proteger todo lo que has construido durante todos estos años. Sabemos que estos son tiempos difíciles. Este virus mortal está amenazando nuestra salud, nuestra economía, nuestros empleos y a los propietarios de nuestras pequeñas empresas. La consulta es gratis. Llame ahora. Te ayudaremos a recuperarte. No esperes hasta que sea demasiado tarde. Llame ya.
And welcome back to PraDa Law Live, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jackie Mendez. I'm your host. Happy Friday once again. This is the last segment where we're going to be giving you guys some information before the weekend on your rights, on some criminal rights that you guys have, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, 888-88-LEGAL. Give us a call. Consultation is free.
That's right. And right before the break, we were talking about the O.J. Simpson case and how Detective Furman, one of the infamous detectives from that case, the one that a lot of people believe that he actually framed O.J. Simpson and that he planted evidence, when he was asked under oath whether or not he planted any evidence, he himself invoked the Fifth Amendment right. Attorney Silver, you wanted to try to explain to us the difference between asserting your Fifth Amendment right in a criminal case versus a civil case, correct?
If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
That was awesome.
I know,
That was one of the best moments ever. Kudos to you, and may he rest in peace, Mr. Johnny
So back
Cochran.
to it. You know, let's talk about, we have obviously the criminal case of OJ, and then you had the civil case where they were suing him for damages. Now, if a defendant in a criminal case takes the Fifth Amendment, a jury can't use that against him. But in a civil case, a jury can basically find what's known as the adverse inference and saying, well, if you're taking the Fifth, your testimony must not be very good for you, so we're going to hold it against you. So there's a little bit of a distinction there between the Fifth Amendment, civil cases, and criminal cases.
Why?
Because the United States Supreme Court said so.
Because in one context, in one case, you might end up in jail,
Right,
and
well,
in one context, you just might end up with a money judgment.
You hit it on the head. The difference is that one case you're dealing with the government, and the other case you're dealing with private citizens.
Okay. Right, and because he was being sued by the family, by Nicole's
and
family.
He was sued for a whole lot of money, and that's part of the reason why he came to Florida and purchased a huge homestead here, so he can put all his money in here. Because as we've spoken on our bankruptcy shows, your homestead is protected.
Here in Florida.
Oh yeah, put your money in your homestead. Buy yourself a nice big old house. Creditors will not be able to touch it.
I ran into O.J. Simpson actually in my neighborhood of Kendall, Pinecrest area.
Oh yeah.
Shortly after he moved here with his son. It's
Was he doing
definitely a
autographs?
story. No. He wanted to buy me a smoothie at Smoothie King, but that's a different story.
We're gonna have to talk about this after the show.
For the break, we will. Absolutely. But you know what? I do have a question coming in from Chelsea, and which is kind of interesting because it kind of ties into like I guess a social media type of thing. But she's asking, can the police require you to give them your passcode for your phone?
Interesting.
Good question.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it with Attorney Haber in the criminal context. I'll tell you, in the immigration context, the answer is yes. Go ahead, Attorney Haber.
If you're asking me as a matter of criminal law, the answer is absolutely, unequivocally no.
Oh, wow.
They can get a warrant, they can try and crack it with a warrant, otherwise they're going to have a cell phone that they cannot access, period, paragraph.
I've heard of this. With the iPhones, there were like cases where with the iPhones they couldn't crack them and they were asking for help. I remember this.
Even Apple won't do it.
Apple won't even help them, right?
But that kind of dovetails into also the cell phone issue dovetails into something very important. And that's social media, because the Fifth Amendment protects you against being forced to speak, but it doesn't protect you against your voluntary statements. Mm-hmm. And stuff that you put out on social media or stuff that other people put out about you on social media is not protected.
Fair game.
It's fair game, and that's in civil and criminal. So in the criminal context, I just wanted to share with you very quickly, if I might. I'm going to read something that's very brief. This is an actual paragraph that's in my standard retainer agreement. So anybody who retains me as a lawyer has to sign off on this. Okay. It's generic language that they're all required to acknowledge. Client understands that any statements that she or he makes about or relative to the case are subject to being admitted into evidence against his or her interests in the case. Client expressly understands that these statements are not limited to those which may be verbally made, but that they include any and all social media posts, comments, discussions, pictures, illustrations, or representations, most specifically those made directly by client, but also those which are made or posted by others that may include the client.
So I better be on my best behavior on social media, right?
Well, the point is this. Let's say that you've got a pending DUI case and you're at, your favorite local watering hole doing shooters and posting pictures of you, whacking them down. It's very incriminating, and it's fair game. It's out there.
And don't tell us that we didn't tell you so after, you were informed at the get. Because I'll tell you, there are like legions of law enforcement officers that scour Facebook looking for convicted felons posting with firearms. Like, that's a violation of probation that we might not be able to help you with if you set yourself up for it.
And I will tell you that the state attorney's office actively searches everybody that they charge. They will go through their social media. Now, sometimes you have private accounts that they can't access. They're going to need a subpoena if they want to break them, and that's a whole separate issue. But anything public that they can get their paws on, count on it coming back to bite you in the butt.
Well, like Casey, I think her name was Casey Anthony, right? The
one
that she was kind of caught on social media during the time when her child was missing and partying, and that's kind of obviously that was incriminating her case.
It's a very good example, and this can happen so innocently and so naively and so simply, especially with the prevalence of social media. So you have to be very careful. Once you put it out there or somebody puts it out there, it's out there.
Wait, Attorney Haber, how can I control? I mean, I've got 2,000 friends on Facebook. How can I control what someone puts about me?
You can't. That's part of the risk that you run of being on social media. Right. Clearly, you're able to argue, well, I didn't do that, but now you've got a situation again, go back to that doing shooters at the bar. If it's time stamped, if it's provable that you were there, what difference does it make who posted it?
Attorney Silver, any?
I mean, you're in a car accident, you're suing for damages, and all of a sudden that insurance company, that investigator, they're looking at your Facebook account and you're posting pictures exercising and mountain climbing. And now exactly, and you're suing them because your back hurts and you're immobilized. Like, that stuff is deadly poison against you.
And it's not going to matter who posted it. It's going to matter when it was posted and when they can prove that it was actually filmed.
Thank you so much, attorneys. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Friday. We wish you a very happy and safe Friday. This is PraDa Law Live, and I'm Jackie Mendez. Thank you so much, Attorney Haber, Attorney Silver, and Attorney Pratt. We're going to have to say goodbye until Monday, but we will see you. Stay safe, and thank you so much for tuning in. See you soon.